realize that the third world is out of the picture when it comes to decision making in the Security Council.
Exactly.
And that has to do with the fact that at the time when the UN was being constituted, the third world was actually under colonial domination.
Exactly.
And so we were excluded. And second, it's also important to bear the fact that if you look at the composition, it is made up of by the victors of the World War II. So the vanquished like Japan and Germany, despite their economic clout and global influence,
are not here.
Are also excluded on the table.
China, France, Russia, UK, US.
Yeah. And even with China, it took a while for PRC to take over the seat. It used to be by Taiwan. If you remember the controversy between the People's Republic of China and the Republic of China, which is the official name of Taiwan.
Okay.
So it's long overdue. But then I think the time is right, and probably this is the best opportunity we have.
Why?
Because gradually we are seeing a gradual shift from a unipolar order to a multipolar order.
Okay.
And a bulk of these changes or transformation are taking place at a faster pace. One, and imagine economies which have mostly been part of the developing world are also becoming influential.
Okay.
With the rise of the likes of India, and like I said, the controversy that's around China. Initially PRC was equally backward until the 1970 economic reforms. So, and then we see the emergence of countries like Brazil on the global stage. So gradually, some developing countries are beginning to make important stride and grow in influence. So that makes it very timely. But then the problem is African Union, despite having a consensus that we need 2 seats, there's been this jostling for who and who should be on the seat on behalf of Africa.
And I was going to come to that.
Yeah, we have, initially there was this competition between Libya and Egypt for the North African seat. And there's this belief that one slot will be given to Sub-Saharan Africa and one will be given to North Africa because of the difference between the Arab-dominated North and the African or Black-dominated South. But there's always been tension between Nigeria and South Africa equally for that slot.
The Sub-Saharan slot.
Yeah, so it kind of looks like, so there's also an issue of how do we resolve our differences to make sure which countries will be there, or will it rather be given to AU, and within ourselves we find a mechanism that find a way to rotate the seat among ourselves.
I think so. I was going to say that would have been the best.
Yeah, so we also have to make a decision on how do we intend to manage the ownership of that seat. But there have been this quid pro quo where Germany, Japan, India are backing Africa for the seat. In return, Africa, because of the number of countries we have, which is the largest concentration of countries on a continent, is supposed to also back these countries in getting a seat on the Security Council. And that's what gives us another advantage, the fact that the excluded developed countries are equally fighting for a fair share of the seat. So now we can now also use that as a leverage.
But anyway, I mean, what would Africa's permanent seat on the UN Security Council do for Africa?
Imagine if we were to have a permanent seat on Security Council, anybody could have vetoed NATO's intervention in Libya.
And NATO wouldn't have any other choice but to stop.
Yeah, because any unilateral action would have constituted an illegality.
Okay.
So it allows us to shield ourselves and, protect our interests.
Okay. Would it happen?
Hopefully so. Because the time is ripe now than it used to be. At the past when the call was being made, the global terrain was still unipolar.
Okay.
But by and large, you are seeing a gradual dissolution of that unipolar order.
Okay. Into a multipolar?
Yeah, and that accounts for the current confrontation and tension we see across the world among the great powers.
Okay. Nobody's allowing anybody to be bullied or to bully anybody anymore. Okay, that makes sense. Ukraine incursions.
Well, it's a surprise, and it's and it's been pretty well organized.
Okay,
pretty well executed. Let's praise the Ukrainian military for that maneuver.
Oh, seriously, we should?
Yeah, I mean, to be able to plan it and conceal it without Russia gathering enough intelligence on it, it's a masterpiece. Let's call a spade a spade. It's a masterpiece. It's an astonishing achievement.
But it was a bold gamble.
Yeah.
It could have backfired massively.
I think it was meant to just intimidate the Russians, but the Russian front fell quicker than they expected.
Here you are, you have limited resources. You are being helped by big brothers across. Then the limited resources you have, you make a bold incursion into a territory of someone who has nuclear capabilities. That's bold.
Yeah.
It could have backfired.
And sometimes you just have to be reckless to secure your gains.
I like that. You sometimes have to be reckless
to secure your gains.
To secure your gains.
And it's about quid pro quo. So if
behave like you are mad a little. People step back and say.
You can't remember when Kim Jong-un showed Trump, if you think you're crazy, I'm crazier than you are.
Yeah.
And we finally had them meet for dialogue, for talks.
Rocket man, rocket boy or something.
Despite all the saber rattling, they finally had to meet. Because if you think you are wild, I'm more of a wild beast.
So, I mean, it happens even in personal life that sometimes if you are there, like in classroom or in school, and somebody keeps bullying you and you are quiet, keeps bullying you, what you're saying is one day you should let him see a bit of madness in you and you take a step back.
Back off. Sometimes not because you can really win, but because you can. It's like the dog trying to prove to a lion that in as much as I can't defeat you, I can bite you where it hurts the most.
I will make the fight a bit difficult for you. More difficult than you thought it's going to happen. Yeah, but but a fight will still happen.
Yeah, you will shake him small.
Yeah, he'll win, but you will Is Russia war weary? Are they tired? It's a Russian public. I mean, the public, not, of course, not Putin, but it's a public.
I'm saying if militarily it is meant to secure a quid pro quo, one, it's a success for Ukraine. If it's meant to demoralize the Russian military, it's a good calculation. But if it's meant to make Putin unpopular, then it's a wrong choice.
Of course.
Because historically, ceding land to enemies is not something the Russians frowned upon in their military tradition. Remember it's under what they call Maskirovka, little masquerade, where you can use these guys and consumers just. And same thing was applied to Nazi Germany when they feigned, defeat, had to place dummy tanks somewhere else. And the German intelligence followed the dummy tanks only for them to bounce back. And the rest was history for Hitler. You remember Napoleon invading Russia in 1812?
Okay.
They ceded as much territory as he needed.
Because the land is there. Take what you think.
So in their military...
But eventually we'll come for it.
In their military, in their concept of warfare, ceding territory as a strategic retreat is not something that the Russians don't accept. It's acceptable to them.
Okay.
But what they don't tolerate is ultimate defeat, not temporal defeat.
Okay.
So now, those that feel like Putin has exaggerated the fear of NATO and Western proximity to its border will perhaps now we'll start taking a second look at, well, yes, Ukraine has invaded Russia, but the question is with whose weapon?
Of course. It's always that.
And you see the footprint of NATO everywhere. Then you begin to buy more into the propaganda of the state or narrative of the state that it is not Ukraine we are fighting on the Ukrainian soil, but we are fighting NATO, using Ukraine as a proxy or a launch pad to curtail the growth of Russia, the resurgence of Russia. And you see one thing about great powers, even when they fall, they find it difficult to accept their decline.
Okay.
Remember when Germany was humiliated after World War I? And the Germans were so embarrassed and had the sense of defeat and unacceptable humiliation. And the end was Hitler.
Yeah, it cooked the grounds well for him.
Yeah. And he started tearing every bit of the agreement Germany had signed, one after the other. So we could also see that now Putin using this to galvanize the indifferent part of people who show indifference initially among the population. So in the short term, whilst it looked like an embarrassment, which it is, a defeat, which it is probably tactically, a humiliation, in the long run, it could be used to marshal public support.
And say, we told you, these guys want our land. They want us. Wow. That's a good take on that. I mean, let's see how it goes. Let's see how it goes. But the point here is, a week after the incursion, what is the game plan? Nobody sees. It seems unclear. What are they going to stay there? Are they, because the list I'm seeing, the number of places they say they control now, 1,000 square kilometers, 74 settlements, hundreds of prisoners of war. What are they going to do? Are they bring them back into Ukraine territory? Are they what is the game plan, the end game, man?
Yeah, Zelensky said they're not trying to set up administrative, what do you call it, structures within those territory. Because
that's an insult to Putin.
Definitely, when you invade a country per international law, you are supposed to make sure the rights of the citizens are respected. And how do you do that if you don't have an administrative system that allows you to govern properly? Okay. But then it's supposed to be temporal. And secondly, you are not supposed to move prisoners of war or prisoners into your territory.
Okay. That's interesting.
And you're also not supposed to displace the population, which will amount to ethnic cleansing.
Yeah, genocide.
So you must have proper administration, be able to cater for some of the needs of these people that are in line with international law.
I mean, but Ukraine, anyway. I mean, let's see how it goes.
And more importantly, if you remember, the collapse of the Soviet Union was occasioned by a coup attempt.
Yes, the USSR.
Yeah. And because of that, true. The Russia system, the elite at this point, have a strong aversion for coup d'etat because it may lead to total collapse of the system. And that secures Putin's position more.
Yeah.
And then fundamentally, aside Putin, there's no one with a clear,
because there's no opposition, really.
Not just even the opposition.
I mean,
the opposition that exists, the alternative in terms of administration, will be the Russian Communist Party, which is the successor to the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. That is the largest opposition, but politically they don't have the clout.
That's the thing.
But within the elite system, the economic oligarchs and the military elites, there's no one that has strong support among the various factions. So it would rather create more factional. What do you call it?
Is it not the doing of Putin? He's clearly orchestrated this to the point where nobody coughs without being scared of. I mean,
exactly so.
He's chasing people living in other people's countries.
Yeah, you get the point. So you now have a system where even when you dislike Putin, you have to keep Putin.
Exactly. He's worked it so well.
So at best, is their only option. At worst, it's still their only option.
And I think the attacks across the world, in the UK and the rest, on people that are known to be clear opposition to him, sends a message that if you came to Ghana, he will still find you.
No, I think, you see, Russia is a resurgent power. We can't dispute that. The growing competition between the Western bloc led by US and the China and the Chinese. China is the immediate competitor to US.
Of course.
And Russia is at a distant half.
Exactly.
But then it still has some leverage and some expertise.
But the cyber attacks alone proves to you that Russia is
but then the triumph of Ukraine in this penetration equally tells us there's a problem with the Russian military.
Of course.
So is there. For whatever power he attempts to display, in the course of doing that, we also see some traces of weaknesses here and there. So it tells you Russia is not as strong as we think. Neither is it as weak as we think.
Exactly. Because I am convinced based on reports that we've had. For instance, in Ghana, there was a guy who was actually arrested. They were into some serious misinformation and malinformation. He has systems that had been set up, and it was proven that this guy was actually being funded by one of these. So,
I have problem with the word disinformation and misinformation. Let's be factually clear. Even the Western world engage in propaganda and disinformation and misinformation.
Yeah, everybody does it.
So when we begin to chase people because they are aligned to one country and leave other, we create a system where we are trying to legitimize things that may also not be legitimate.
Yes, but if you deliberately push out false information,
but in
to win a certain constituency to your side, does it not makes it illegal, whether it was done by US or done by Ghana or whoever? I mean, wrong is wrong.
Yeah, the biggest false information of the 21st century was the lies that took US to Iraq.
Of course.
Have they been able to produce the weapons of mass destruction?
We're still looking for them. Okay, quickly. Sudan, Switzerland. What the army says we won't go.
Yeah, because there was an attempt on, after there was an attempt on Burhan's life.
Yes, last week we touched on that.
So he refused to go. And secondly, I think, despite the fact that the army is on a back foot, he's confident that he will still win the war. And then you also need to look at the fact that the erstwhile elite of the Islamist-dominated regime of al-Bashir are also using this, this war to rehabilitate themselves.
But is the RSF there? Are they in Switzerland?
Yeah, the RSF sent their representative because they feel that at the moment they have the upper hand, which they do. But then in the long term, you remember in the Syrian civil war when it started, everybody thought Assad would lose the war.
Okay.
But with the help of Russia and Iran, he gained momentum, and then today where we are, that some people who backed his opponent have not gone to reconcile with him. Likewise, if you look at Afghanistan, for 20 years we thought NATO was winning the war until they had to withdraw. So it's not always the fact that when you're winning the battles, you win the war. And then the greatest asset that the Sudanese armed forces have against the RSF at the moment is the fact that in as much as the citizenry dislike both sides in this conflict, they find it more convenient to be under the military than to be under RSF.
Interesting.
Because the military, for whatever ill it possesses, has a semblance of national institution and national unity. But the RSF has exclusivity of being dominated by people from Darfur.
Okay.
Which is an outliner within the Sudanese political architecture. If you know where the Darfur is, at the extreme end of the border.
Okay.
So it kind of make them have that kind of, I think, difficulty of acceptability because there's a different outlook between those in Khartoum, for example. So those at the coastal side of Sudan have a bit of more cosmopolitan outlook.
Okay.
Than those from Darfur, who are more in line with their tribal culture, tradition, and affiliations. So they tend to see the RSF having that dominance to be more like, for lack of a better word, a primitive something. And then the fact that RSF was born out of Janjaweed and all the reports of its war crimes and atrocities that were committed in Darfur around in the early 2000s, that led to the arrest warrant issued against Omar al-Bashir himself. And then people are now seeing the repetition. From the report, we are seeing the rape, the lootings, okay? People are not living the reality of those in Darfur. And it kind of make the RSF an unacceptable option in between. So the Sudanese armed forces are the lesser of the two evils.
But if they are not going to Switzerland, if the army says we're not going, they are it's like two teams fighting. The big one says I won't go. How is this a peace talk?
Well, perhaps it could prepare the ground for a further, dialogue. One thing about diplomacy, you just don't shut down doors.
Okay, of course, definitely.
That is why, despite U.S. not recognizing Hamas, despite U.S. labeling Hamas as a terrorist organization, it allowed Qatar, which is a U.S. ally, to host its office.
Okay.
Despite U.S. dislike for the Taliban, in the course of their, their occupation in Afghanistan, they had backdoor channels. And the same backdoor channel was used to secure American exit.
Oh, okay.
So there's always a need to also have...
Open the door, you never know what will happen.
Yeah. There's always that need for that kind of a small window of dialogue or talks, be it indirectly.
Okay, let's hope and pray that it goes well. Gaza.
And then the military is now trying to, at first they had a diplomatic row with Iran, and now they have to restore the ties, and they are trying to also secure some military support from that place.
Interesting happenings across the world. High-stake Gaza ceasefire. Hostage release talks. Doha, what's happening?
Well, we are now seeing the practical result of Netanyahu's, for lack of a better... No, I think that is recklessness even. Let's call a spade a spade. You don't kill somebody you are negotiating with and tell me you still believe in talks.
Ismail Haniyeh.
Ismail Haniyeh. Haniyeh was willing to discuss anything, right? Ismail has made it clear. He's not talking anything. He's not... And you see, people thought because he has this He comes from the armed wing of Hamas.
Okay.
He's not a savvy political operator.
Like he's just a militant to the
He's
core.
one of the most smartest, what do you call it, operators you can have there. And look at the difficulty he has placed the mediators.
Okay.
In a very strategic position. He cornered them all, including Israel and Qatar and everybody. Simple. Biden presented us with a plan that has United Nations security backing. Resolution 2375, right? If I'm not mistaken, the exact number of the resolution. So now we are not coming to discuss anything further. We're only coming to discuss the implementation of that resolution.
His Hamas are the peace talks.
They refused to come. They said
Okay.
until we are discussing the parameters of the implementation of that resolution,
We are not interested in any other thing.
and the proposal brought by America itself, then they are not discussed. So their absence. So what do you call it? Egypt and Qatar are trying to act as mediators on their behalf, but Sinwar has refused to come to the table. He said there is no need to talk.
Al Jazeera says cautious optimism. Is that the right description?
Well, I think, wow, this is a very serious issue. When you talk, they say you have been anti-Israeli, anti-Semite. But let's be very frank here. Who has thwarted the peace talks successively? Netanyahu. And who has aided him?
America.
America and the West. And if you look at every drop of bomb and every Palestinian blood has a fingerprint and footprint of these countries.
Interesting. But the negotiations are underway.
No, you see, let's be very.
Israel is there.
Let's be very.
US
no,
is
you
there.
See, you see,
Qatar is there. Egypt is
the
there.
ICJ's ruling that the occupation
Just illegal.
constitutes an illegality. Technically, October 7 is no more terrorist attack,
It's self-defense.
but a genuine resistance, a self-defense.
Okay.
So we can now begin to look at, in the cause of Hamas or the Palestinians, exercising their right of self-defense, where they war crimes committed in those decisions.
Then we deal with those separately.
They will deal with those separately.
Okay.
But the whole concept of October 7, per ICJ's opinion, is a legitimate attack. Because what's an illegality? I have the right to resist. And then let's even be practical here. Hamas was created in 1987. Israel occupied the West Bank in 1967. There were 2 decades in between. Hamas was a reaction of Israeli abuse for 20 years. Because Hamas was born out of the Intifada, what do you call it, the Palestinian uprising,
Yeah.
when they felt disillusioned with Israeli policy. But successive Israeli, what do you call it, abrogation of agreement, successive Israeli breaking of violation of every single international law has the backing of America. Oslo Accord was supposed to last for 5 years. 93, right? Those who, you see, the Palestinians are given 2 options. Non-violent, what do you call it, resistance, or violent resistance. And successively, Israeli policy has rather encouraged armed resistance. Because those who have accepted to talk to you, to negotiate with you, are being hounded in West Bank, humiliated with raids here and there. Should we continue to negotiate in perpetuity? They have agreed to recognize you. And in return, what have you done to them? More land expropriation, more settlement expansion, more theft of their resources. And then when you talk, and interestingly again, okay, the Israeli Knesset, the parliament, passed a resolution that forbid the creation of a Palestinian state. So if you don't recognize my existence, why should I even negotiate with you in the first place?
Interesting.
So successively, Israel itself put its protectors and its backers in a very difficult corner.
It's overdoing. It's like somebody gives you permission to do something, you're overdoing. Now the person is embarrassed. You become an embarrassment to the one who is being protected.
And if you look at Netanyahu's address in U.S. Congress, it made the Congress look like a circus.
You think Biden has allowed Netanyahu to be totally confident?
Biden has demonstrated absolute weakness. And I think Biden will go down in history no matter how we argue about it, as perhaps he will go down with ignominy. Because for every single Palestinian blood, we see Biden's weakness in it. let's just look at this proposal that Hamas refused to negotiate. You, Biden, brought the proposal that Israel forwarded it to you. And as at now, Israel has been in violation of the so-called proposal you said came from Israel. And you've not even been able to stamp your authority.
Libyans in South Africa are about to be deported.
Wow, I think so. We need to look at that carefully. What might have occasioned the decision of South Africa not to prosecute them in the first place? Because if what we are doing is illegality,
they should all be in jail, not deported.
If not all of them, perhaps the key ringleaders. But perhaps,
you think South Africa has found something about this illegal training camp?
Or perhaps they equally,
or they have people in Libya.
no, or perhappen, what might happen, perhaps they also identified that they saw the weaknesses in their system, and those who might have been compromised within their system are too big to fall.
But why were the charges dropped?
That's what I'm saying, because if those people are affiliated with the government in Benghazi, which does not have international recognition, because the government with international recognition is the GNU, Government of National Unity, which is in Tripoli, then first of all, I don't know how to put it, any dialogue diplomatically with that group itself would be a contravention of international law.
Interestingly, all 95 of them are being sent to Benghazi, not Tripoli.
Yeah. So meaning they have something to do with the government in Benghazi, which is the unrecognized government.
Exactly.
So what might have occasioned that is hard to tell. Is it in avoidance of political backlash? Is it that the lapses that allowed that to happen in South Africa itself would be embarrassing to ANC should it be disclosed publicly? Or is he an attempt by Ramaphosa to just seal the case and let's avoid further embarrassment? So we can't tell at the moment.
We can't tell at the moment.
But then I think it also shows you the reach of the Benghazi government vis-a-vis as against its rival in Tripoli. I just saw something yesterday which I'm still yet to confirm on, I think, a particular reputable African website, Military Africa, and they said they posted something about a regiment of the government in Benghazi being part of a training in Ghana in the Flintlock, participating in Flintlock exercises in Ghana. I was like, wow, I'm here to confirm that though. But then if so be it that you have element of Khalifa Haftar's men partaking in Flintlock exercises, which is quite a very important part of our capacity building, what do you call it, training mechanism for most African militaries, which is backed by US. You know, Flintlock is backed by, I think, by US, right? If I'm not mistaken, yeah. And then that shows a de facto recognition itself of Khalifa Haftar.
Africa is disobeying what the international community is telling it. Back Tripoli, but Africa is back in Benghazi. You think so? You're suspecting so?
Not necessarily so, but if you still allow them, the fact that you allow them to participate,
you're recognizing them.
It's a de facto, what do you call it? For example, despite the Taliban government not officially being recognized by China, they've been signing deals and agreement, which itself is a de facto recognition.
Of course, that's what I mean.
So it kind of puts you in a difficult position to say you haven't recognized, you haven't interfered. You know, so I think we need to avoid, that I've always advocated for AU taking the lead in resolving Africa's
conflict. You've said that so many times. Thank you very much for coming through. Alassane Bello, always an exciting experience chatting with you on international affairs. As always, on the Friday edition of Top Story. Thank you for coming through. Weekend, what's happening? Attire?
I guess this time there's a Auri around.